Hey, Mike, how's the sketch writing going?
It's going well. I actually have some fairly good ideas so far. I think Ben, I think Ethan and I saw you when you were out. You were walking somewhere. Him and I were driving around. And I think he saw you over at Shippey. But I was telling him about our idea, and we were bouncing ideas off each other for the sketch. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Make sure to keep me in the loop on that.
yeah, I definitely will. We'll touch base on it. We'll talk at some point this week, and then we'll present our ideas next week.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you're still gonna get back to me on the
Yes.
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 Cool.
I've not forgotten about that.
Awesome. Hey, Luis.
Hi Ben, how you doing?
How's it going?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. How's everyone else doing? We'll start the meeting in about 5 minutes as usual. Just want to give people the time to come on. How is everyone doing?
I'm doing well.
You, Louise.
It's wonderful.
Stressed as always.
Of course. We're getting towards midterm season, I believe. Like we're getting to around that point in the semester, so things are gonna start picking up.
I don't
Everyone,
wanna believe
remember to
that.
take care of yourselves. Put school first and all that.
Guys, I kind of want to ask, if you had to pick a color that sort of describes how you're feeling right now, what would you pick?
I like a nice dark green. I don't know how else to describe it. I think a dark green would be appropriate for kind of this week.
Dude, Luis, we're on the exact same page. That is, I was literally about to say like a nice deep green because it's like happy, but also like kind of slow because it's a cold week.
Mhm.
So me and
I
you
gotta say husky blue.
on the same wavelength.
Okay, dark blue, that's what I was thinking.
I
Yeah,
was thinking dark blue too, Lakita.
See, wavelengths right there, Katie, wavelengths. We're all
Just
similar
makes me-
frequency.
This looks like we have camps forming here. We got a dark green camp. We got a dark blue camp.
they're both pretty similar colors at the end of the day. So we're in the same field. It's just a
true.
different side of the darker like color of that spectrum. So,
Anyone feeling
dark
light and
blue.
airy, like a beautiful yellow or like a hot pink or something?
Today isn't a beautiful yellow kind of day. Today's almost kind of like a gray day, and I don't mean that in like a bad, sad way. I mean that like in a peaceful, serene, thoughtful kind of way, almost.
that's very deep, Ben.
Well, thank you.
I
That's, yeah,
think
that's,
if we were on
that's
campus
true.
right now, and if it was a Tuesday or a Thursday, it would be like a mucky brown because of all the rain.
Hey, I like brown. I like brown.
I
Brown is
said
good. Brown is the
people-
color of dirt.
Yeah. So I think we have enough people to get started. So I think I will get started a little bit early today compared to normal. I'll start sharing my screen and call to order. Let me just wait for the obnoxious top bar to go away. And then here we are. So we'll call to open at 6:33 p.m. Attendance will be taken based off of the votes we do later, so be sure to stay until we do the votes. Is there any public comment at this time? This is something I brought back for the emergency Senate, but I'm just going to keep here. So if there's any members of the public who would like to come and say something on behalf of them or any students at UConn, feel free to raise your hand and I'll add you to this list. If not, we'll just move forward into reports. Seeing no public comment, we will move directly into reports. Reports will not be done vocally, as they have not been since I became speaker. They can be found in the PowerPoint within the folder I shared with all of you to announce the meeting. That folder is also on the Minutes website. So be sure to review all that and reach out to the appropriate individuals if you have any inquiries about their reports. We will now move into voting items. The first voting item is the approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion on the previous week's minutes? So this is not for the emergency Senate. This is for the Wednesday before the emergency Senate. The emergency Senate's the minutes are not ready yet, and they will likely be ready with this week's meeting minutes at the next session of the Senate later in February. So with that said, is there any discussion on these minutes?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
The previous meeting, the previous minutes repeatedly misgender former Senator Hill.
Okay, so let's vote to return these minutes for revision with that note. So I'm going to motion to, by unanimous consent, return these minutes for revision, as Senator Keelty pointed out a flaw with them as they stand. So we will return them for revision and get them back next week, unless there is an objection. Are there any objections to this? Seeing no objections, it is so moved. These will also be voted on with the other two at the next section. We now move into the confirmation of the NACP ex-officio senator. The previous NACP ex-officio senator resigned from their position and has elected, and their organization has elected to bring forward a new individual to myself, the Chief Justice, the Chief Diversity Officer, and the President, who will be confirmed here today with a 2/3 affirmative vote of this body. That individual is Zoe Blevins. Zoe, are you here to accept the Senate seat?
Yeah, do you want me to turn my camera on for this or no?
You can go right ahead, whatever makes you the most comfortable.
Okay.
So you accept the nomination, just to be clear?
Sorry.
Okay. So are there any questions for the nominee for the NACP ex officio Senate seat? Seeing none, is there any discussion on the, Lakita?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to ask what made you want to join as the ex officio for NACP?
Actually Sage had class, and Sage and I are the ones that run NACP and NASA, and Sage was the one that hired me at NACP too. So she kind of asked me if I could help her out, especially, because she's applying for a lot of scholarships right now, and she also has class at this time, and I'd be more than willing to help since I represent NACP on several different boards as well. So that's why.
Wonderful. Thank you for the question and the answer there. Are there any further questions before we move into discussion? Seeing none, we're going to move into discussion. Would you care to make a statement on behalf of yourself, Zoe?
No.
Wonderful. Is there any further discussion on this confirmation? Seeing none, I'm going to move to forward this confirmation by unanimous consent. Are there any objections to confirming Zoe in this position by unanimous consent? If so, raise your hand or unmute yourself at this point. Seeing no objections, congratulations, Zoe. We will now move into the confirmation of the Pan-Atlantic Council ex officio senator. This is a similar circumstance. The previous individual in this position resigned, and the organization provided a new person. Claudia, are you here to accept this nomination? I don't think that Claudia is here at the moment, so I'm going to accept the nomination on her behalf, which can be done. So Are there any questions or points of discussion on this confirmation? Seeing none, we are going to confirm Claudia as the Panhellenic Council ex officio senator by unanimous consent. Are there any objections to this confirmation? Seeing no objections, it is so moved. Congratulations to Claudia. We will now move into the United Act. Both of the senators who were just confirmed have full voting rights in the rest of this meeting. Would the authors of the United Act like to present it at this time?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, if I may.
Of course, you yourself and parliamentarian Kataria. I know she says I've never done that, so I wanted to do it once. Neha, you and Josh are welcome to present it now.
Neha, if you'd like to go first, that's fine with me too, whichever way you'd like to do this.
You can honestly explain it because I know Josh is the writer. Mostly I was more I gave an idea, he made it. So you can talk first and I'll explain.
Sounds good. So I, as usual, don't want to belabor the body's time too much. I'll give a brief overview, and if there are any questions, I'll answer them. So last year we passed the Peers Act, which created our ex officio voting senators. We just confirmed 2 of them and delegated them to certain organizations. This piece of legislation does 3 things. It expands the amount of organizations we give them to. The bottom 4 now: Yukon Hillel, Muslim Students Association, Creating Caring Communities, and Middle Eastern Students Association will now all be granted the right to an ex officio senator as well. I believe there are additional changes made to the, I think it goes into the Constitution or the bylaws that cap the number of ex officio seats as a percentage of the total number of elected seats. That way, there will never be a situation where there are more not confirmed members than elected members of the Senate. And it also makes a relatively minor change where the chief diversity officer will have to be one of the ones informed every time the organizations wish to assume an ex officio seat, which brings that number up to 4 now. It's now student body president, chief diversity officer, speaker of the Senate, and the chief justice all need to be informed. I believe that's a pretty broad overview. Neha, I'll yield to you if you want to go into any more detail. And yeah, then go into questions.
Thanks, Josh, and thanks for the mention, Louise. So we're just adding in, like you said, the Yukon Hillel Muslim Student Association, Creating Caring Communities, and then MESA, so the Middle Eastern Student Association. We're actually going to see legislation about the creation of that soon. But we just wanted to add 4 of these seats because we think that they need a voice in student government, and we haven't had representation in ex officio seats from these groups, so we wanted to add it. I specifically really wanted to add in Creating Caring Communities, and I'm in that club. And if anyone wants to be a part of it, you can let me know because I'm in the e-board and I love it. But it's specifically for the homeless and food insecure population, which is something that we work with directly in USG. So I wanted to make sure that they had a voice here, and that we're just amplifying voices from groups that we haven't given a platform yet to. So this is just giving everyone we can a platform. If anyone has any future ideas for the future, you can always let us know. But these are the organizations we're adding. And me and Josh are pretty proud of it, right, Josh? So.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I also, just going off of that, wanted to say that if this formula goes into effect of how many, like the cap of ex officio seats, I believe, and I'll defer to Damani on this because he's better at the math than I am, but I believe that there will be, the cap will be at 25 ex officio seats, given our current numbers. So that gives you all an idea practically of how many ex officio seats there could be. If this legislation passes, 19 of them will be delegated. So that will leave the 6 more for the Senate to choose however it wants to put those in.
Thank you for the clarification from the authors. We're now into questions, so I will be accepting questions for the authors on the legislation now. Mitchell.
Yeah. So awesome stuff. I think this is great. My personal opinion, but I did just want to kind of follow up on what Josh was just talking about. In the future, how will we? I mean, obviously this could be amended in the future, but at what point? Like, if we're saying we're going to cap it at 25 now, at some point we're obviously our future Senate's going to have to either decide that we keep that 25 or bump that 25 up, and I don't know. I was wondering if anyone has any ideas for how WIN will deal with that in the future, in terms of if another organization comes out, but it might be similar to, say, UConn, Hillel, or any of the other ones, and then I don't know. How does anyone have any ideas for how we might deal with that in the future? Again, I support this legislation, but
if I may, Mr. Speaker.
Josh.
Thank you. Mitchell, I think that it would be something that could absolutely be brainstormed and talked about going forward. To be honest, like, I don't have any ideas at this particular point, but I have faith in the abilities of the student governments of that time and the Senate of that time to be able to handle that situation as best as they can. And I think that we all should as well, to be able to, that they'll be able to handle those problems if they come up. And if they don't, then, so be it. Thank you.
Neha, feel free to also answer the question.
Thanks, Mitchell. Nice to see you always. I was just going to clarify, if you're asking for logistical reasons, I believe it's an amendment to the bylaws or constitution, correct me if I'm wrong, to the current speaker and the Josh, who was speaker for 2 years. They know the constitution and bylaws more than me, but I think it would just be like an amendment. You pass it in Senate and then it increases the seats, and then you can just like make like a similar thing like this. We always keep all of our legislation. So if you do want to add more, if you do want to write something similar to this, we can literally pull it up and add to it in the future, in a future Senate. If you're asking like for that, I don't know. That made sense.
Thank you both for the clarification. To kind of just add 2 cents here. This creates a constitutional barrier to adding more ex officio seats than this, which needs to be changed via a referendum of the students to vote on the new constitution, as opposed to the bylaws, which wouldn't do that. So this, in effect, like, it's not a hard barrier to adding more ex officio seats, but it makes it more difficult than it would be if it was just in the bylaws. For clarity there. Senator Keelty, is this a question?
It's actually an answer, because I wrote that amendment that became that barrier. And so right now, the way that this currently works, Mitch, is right now, I believe we have listed in the Constitution, there will be 15 ex officio seats, and those are the 15 that are listed right here. And what that means in practice is that every time we want to add a new ex officio seat, we need to amend the Constitution, which requires approval from both the Board of Trustees and from the student body as at large. What this does is it looks to make it easier to do that. Essentially, what we're saying is up to 1/3 of the Senate can be made up of ex officio seats, and we can allot those by a simple bylaw change, which is, I believe, a majority in the Senate plus the signature of the president at any time. So it makes it easier for us to respond and to, like you said, add those organizations when it becomes appropriate to do so.
Thank you, Senator Keelty. Braden.
Hi, guys. So this is a great bill, obviously, but my question was, later in this meeting, we're going to be establishing the Middle Eastern Cultural Center. And since all of the other cultural centers already have ex officio seats, and we are already doing this bill to create additional ex officio seats, would you guys be opposed to amending the bill to include that soon to be cultural center?
Would either of the authors like to answer that question?
So we actually, sorry, I was just started talking. First of all, thank you, Ben, for clarifying. There's still things that I don't know, so I'm so happy when you guys like help me with all the things that I don't know and still learning. Correct me if I'm wrong. We reached out to Christine because we know that this bill was on its way at the same time as this one. And I believe the Middle Eastern Student Association is like what we meant by the new cultural center, because it's still not like a cultural center yet. So that's why we named it the Middle Eastern Student Association. But correct me if I'm wrong, Josh. I think that's why we did that, right? Because it wasn't like yet an official
Absolutely.
cultural center.
Absolutely. Yes.
If we
So-
want, could we change the wording once it becomes a cultural center? Is that how it works?
Could be done, yes. In a future amendment to the bylaws. But seeing as it's not there right now, we could change it, but it wouldn't allow the students currently involved in the organization to claim the Senate seat until they become the cultural center, if that makes sense. So there's a little bit of a technicality there. Senator Bergen.
Just to clarify, which seats are being added again?
It's the bottom four. 3 of them are highlighted. I meant to highlight all 4. Thank you. It's UConn Hillel, Muslim Students Association, Creating Caring Communities, and Middle Eastern Students.
All right. Thank you to all those who asked questions. Are there any further questions before we move into discussion?
Yeah, hey guys. So again, almost like a brainstorming question, but when we are adding organizations in the future, should we try and come up with like, hey, an organization should have like 50 members first before they're able to get a seat, or like how, I don't know, is there anything along the lines that anyone has thought of? Because once we do reach that barrier, or I guess that 1/3 barrier, that's also what I was going to ask about, Ben. That 1/3 of the Senate can be filled up by these ex officio seats. I imagine at some point in UConn's, well, I'd hope, because that, I mean, we have lots of inclusive communities and that want to get more involved. I guess either that 1/3 would be amended or changed, or will we, or I'm just asking if we should come up with something now where it's like, oh, like if an organization or a community center or whatever has like 50 folks associated with it, or an association or whatnot, then it's able to get an ex officio seat. Is there anything like that now, or I apologize for not being up on all of the bylaws of everything, and maybe that's a question for Ben or whatnot. But I'm just curious if there's anything like that right now, or if it's kind of just like when an organization is established, they can reach out to us and we can do this.
I'm comfortable
I'll
answering
go.
that question.
Go ahead, Ben.
So right now it is the latter process. Essentially, we need to decide whether who essentially deserves representation, and of course, all communities deserve representation. And I would definitely be in support of identifying some sort of framework, but I think it's important that we keep in mind whenever we're talking about this that the students as students have representation in their elected members, the MCD, the academic, and the residential senators, and these are specifically for organizations that serve communities that otherwise might be underrepresented or unrepresented, their interests in the Senate, and so essentially, yes, we need to choose the organizations that get those ex officio seats. I don't know if that answers the question.
Are there any further questions on this legislation? Seeing none, we will move into discussion. Are there any points of discussion on this legislation? Seeing no discussion, we're going to move into a vote on this piece of legislation. I'm going to set up the polling system now. Let me just change the time to 2 minutes instead of 5. Record individual responses. Open poll. All right, I've opened the poll. Please go through and vote whichever way you please. We will take the 2 minutes to do so. This is also going to be used for attendance, so please respond honestly. While this is occurring, please go into the agenda after you voted and begin reviewing the next piece of legislation. We'll introduce it as soon as we have the vote on this one. We still have 3 people who have yet to answer, so please answer if you can. I really wish that this polling feature would tell me who had answered, so that way I could know, like, if they were a senator or not, while this was happening. Perhaps there is a way to do that. I'll look into WebEx and find out. All right. 12 seconds remaining, so get the vote in on the previous piece of legislation if you can. Okay, so in a vote of 24 to 0, this legislation passes, and we will move on to the next piece of legislation here. Let me. The authors may introduce this legislation at this time. Go ahead, Fabio.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. I hope your semesters are going well as they can be under these weird circumstances that we will go on to tell our kids someday about. This bill is for budget amendments. You'll see in purple, I'm going to have to motion to amend. I can do that now because of the new rules to add that in. So should I do that now, Luis, or like, should I motion to amend it now and then vote on it, or should I introduce it first?
Sorry, my computer was giving me difficulty there. Wait until you introduce it, and then as soon as we get into discussion, it can be the first thing discussed.
Okay, neato. So, to introduce the bill, so they're just a couple of things brought to me by the advocacy directors. So right here, first thing is the line item tampon time was asked to be changed to period care packages, and the reasoning for that was at the request of the services chair, so Becky Feldman. But my understanding is that they're looking to expand the initiative to be a little bit more broad. So because they'll be purchasing more than just tampons, the line item named tampon time really wasn't, it needed to be changed in order to use the money from that line item to purchase non-tampon items. So that's why that's being changed. Then second thing is student services. So Becky asked for an increase of $16,600 for the line item subcommittee task force. So that's just going to enable the task force and subcommittees under services to have more funding for their specific initiatives. Just to name a couple, there's a community fridge that is being considered that they look for funding for under the food insecurity task force. So there are new initiatives which they require funding for. And then the last thing here that I guess I'll motion to amend is right there. in green. That's what I'm going to motion to amend for. And this is something that came up very recently over the last 2 to 3 days. Otherwise, it would have been incorporated in the bill from the get-go. And I spoke to Christine, who's the student development chair, and she's been in contact with the UConn senior program. And they asked if USG would be able to collaborate with them because the cost for mailing t-shirts out to seniors is very significant. It's going to cost $7 a t-shirt. And they need to do that because there's a considerable number of seniors not on campus. So the funding that they had normally allocated for this, I guess, based on normal years, is not enough. So they asked for USG to collaborate. We're not totally sure that it's going to happen, but I wanted to amend the budget tonight instead of amending it again when we're sure it's going to happen to enable us to do that. So USG's logo will be on the t-shirt this year if we go forward with the collaboration, which is pretty neat. So that's for new line item and for a maximum of 35,000. That 35,000 number is overestimated because we haven't gotten the estimate yet for what it's going to cost to put the USG logo on the t-shirt. But I'm not comfortable saying what I think it'll end up being just in case it's not. But so it's a maximum of 35,000. And those are the budget amendments.
Amendment as friendly, Fabio, as you are the author.
I do take it as friendly.
Okay, so then it is so moved, and this is now the reality of the bill. Are there any questions on this legislation? Lakita.
Hey, so when you said $7 per t-shirt, like, did you mean like shipping? Each t-shirt would cost 35, or like what? I guess like what are they contributing versus what are we like approximately? I know it's not exact numbers.
So thank you, Lakita, for the question. It is important. I don't have that information for you, but so the cost overall has increased substantially because it costs $7 to mail a t-shirt, is my understanding. The t-shirt cost is in addition to the $7. So, you know, compared to what we normally spend on t-shirts, like if we take the Husky-thon t-shirts, for example, I think the quote just came in around $16,000 for like 4,000 shirts. USG is paying for those like we did last year. And there's no shipping, to my knowledge, involved with those. So that's why it's 14,000-ish. You go by last year. Last year was 14,000-ish for 4,000 t-shirts. Senior program is looking to purchase, I want to say 5,000. They're looking to distribute 2,000 on campus and the remainder shipped, to my understanding. So that's a considerable number of t-shirts at $7 for shipping each. So that's where the cost really goes up. So I don't know what they'll end up contributing, but they originally were looking for us to cover shipping costs, but at that time, the USG logo wasn't on the t-shirt. So it wasn't possible. We can't just give money to places. So they are getting a new quote to have a USG logo put on the t-shirts. Once that's done, we'll loop in Kylie for the PR director to like pick the logo, whatever. And that's what the cost is going to change. So USG is likely going to cover shipping plus whatever additional cost to put the USG logo on. So it's a collaboration. That's the plan right now.
Gotcha. And then sorry, one other question was sort of I know like this obviously affects the rollover amount that like typically we have. Like how would I guess our budgeting numbers change after all of these line items have been approved?
Another good question. So on my website now, on the USG website, you'll also see in my report, I have begun publishing, so it's publicly available. That chart that I originally showed you all a couple months ago, I added a new metric now for tier 2 funding, for overall USG spending. So if you all wanted to go to my website right now, you could do that, USG UConn EDU, click on me, the comptroller, under branches or whatever it is, and you'll see that chart. So I just ran numbers at the beginning of February. We are bringing in an income right now of $200,000. So I'm not worried about this additional line item from the t-shirt. And those numbers are likely to fluctuate more as the semester goes on. But right now, we are bringing in an income of $200,000. That's significant because we've only gone through the fall semester. So we're running an income of $200,000 without getting any of the disbursements from the spring. So it is quite possible that we end up this year with an income of 400,000, despite, me certainly doing my best to allow as many tier 2 funding things as possible under the rules, and by encouraging the advocacy directors to put together initiatives. So that's the trajectory now. That may change. It's still really too early to tell for certain. So, to answer your question directly, I'm not worried about the cost, that the t-shirts would impose. But, it does look like we're going to bring in a significant income. So it is something to be aware of.
Thank you to Fabio and thank you to Lakita for that line of discussion. Legislate before we move into discussion. Seeing none, we are now in discussion. Are there any points of discussion on this legislation? With no discussion, I'm going to move to forward this piece of legislation by unanimous consent. Is there an objection to doing so? With no objection, it is so moved. Congratulations to the authors. The budget is so amended. We will now move into a funding update on discrimination and access. I will yield to the authors of this legislation to present it at this point.
Hi everyone. So this was written by Damani, Fabio, and I, and I'm going to talk first and give them like the general idea, and if I miss anything, please let me know. But the first part, all the changes are highlighted, and the first part is basically requiring RSOs to give reasonable accommodations to students with disabilities. And then the second part, 6.2F, that is banning basically discrimination of all types, because we found out that there is no policy banning discrimination currently, like no direct policy. So this is kind of what our goal is here. So I yield to them if there's anything more.
Yeah, if I could thank you, Abby. And I really want to give kudos to Abby for bringing this forward. This was her idea, the problem that she found herself. So thank you so much, because I know it's going to improve the funding policies. And for any senator that has similar ideas, I've always said it out, lots of times, bring them forward and we'll work them out. So I just want to highlight that the Chapter 3 of the Tier 2 funding policies is basically the requirements for funding, the eligibility for funding, which is why we're putting it in as a requirement, in a sense, that RSOs provide reasonable accommodations. So what that means is the funding staff of USG will evaluate, a funding request to ensure that, some sort of efforts are being made to offer reasonable accommodations. And what it also means is if a student asks for a reasonable accommodation and doesn't receive one, they can come to me to possibly pursue a sanction with the judiciary, because it is a funding requirement that the group is then bound to follow. The difference is under 6.2F, we didn't want to put in that it's like a requirement not to discriminate, because that's a given. So under 6.2F, we put in that acts of discrimination or inactions of discrimination, in a sense, would be cause for a sanction. So it's just we approach it two different ways for each of these things, and I just wanted to emphasize that. But otherwise, again, thank you, Abby. Thank you, Damani, for your help. And I look forward to hopefully passing these tonight.
It was a pleasure to work with both of you on this.
Thank you to the authors for presenting this legislation. Are there any questions for them at this time? Seeing no questions, we will move directly into discussion. Are there any points of discussion on this legislation? With no points of discussion, we will move to forward this by unanimous consent once more. Yeah, I guess that's the best plan. Are there any objections to forwarding this by unanimous consent? Seeing no objections, it's so forwarded. Congratulations to the authors. Let me get rid of this bar. We will now move into the bylaw update, Tier 2 funding procedures. And I will yield to the authors of this update to present it. Lakita, I see you have your hand up.
Okay, so I had my hand up earlier, but I guess it wasn't seen. I just wanted to take the time to thank all the authors that were working on the earlier legislation, because sometimes inaction is just as like detrimental as taking the wrong action. And so like thank you for including that there and like actually establishing a protocol for that.
Thank you for your comment, Lakita. We are now in the bylaw update, Tier 2 funding procedures. I will yield to the authors to present this.
Damani, I mean, you're the author, so feel free to present unless you want me to.
Sure. So I misread that. I remembered that as me and you authoring that, not me and Aaron. My apologies to her. But I sat down with our funding supervisor and we had a couple of conversations about this. Essentially, what this stems out of is occasionally from the time when a committee, in this case the funding staff, votes to approve an expense and the time that the purchase order is actually being processed, sometimes the orders shift, right? The regular go-to example here is if you've ever ordered something on, which is regularly what tier 2s do, and you put it in your cart and then you look away from it and you come back like 2 or 3 days later and you see that the price has changed by like 15 cents, right? The way the rules currently stand is every time that cart fluctuation happens, the professional staff have to email and Aaron, our funding supervisor. And what ends up happening is we have piles and piles of these small, less than $10 amounts. As Aaron described them to me, a majority of the less than $10 amounts are less than $5, where it's just such a small amount of money relative to the purchase, but also relative to the requests and request volumes, that it's really not worth the staff waiting over a weekend or waiting till Aaron is back in the office or checking her email again. So what we've proposed here is to simply allow the professional staff to themselves authorize an increase of up to $10, which means if it's $10.01, they still do need to email Aaron. In this case, if something goes up to $100, that's still within the funding supervisor's discretion. Something were to go up to over 500, that might be cause for the funding staff to take a look at the request again, or the comptroller themselves could go ahead and authorize that increase. So that's what this is here. I'll yield to questions.
Are there any questions for the authors of this bylaw update? Seeing no questions, are there any points of discussion on this bylaw update? I'll posit a point of discussion briefly. I think that this is a very useful change in terms of efficiency in the funding office, and I'm glad to see it come into action if the vote is affirmative. That is the only point I will make. With that, seeing no further points of discussion, if there is one, feel free to unmute yourself and announce it, because I do not see it. We are going to move to forward this by unanimous consent once more. Are there any objections to doing so? Feel free, if you object to moving it by unanimous consent, to unmute yourself or to raise your hand at this time. And I'll give about a minute to verify that that's not the case. It is so moved, and the Senate passes this by unanimous consent. Back to the agenda. We will now move into an amendment to the Student Body Senate Standing Rules, Spring 2021. I actually wrote this, so I will yield to myself to present this. This came out of a discussion that I had with Becky, actually. You can see a couple of comments left on the side, where we were discussing whether or not it would be prudent to allow committees to if a piece of legislation or a motion is to go through more than one committee, to grant it a special degree of reverence on the Senate's agenda, and that's essentially what this does. Should one half of all current senators who are in the office sponsor a piece of legislation, or it's sponsored by all 4 standing committees, so that means it passes through all the committees, then it will be put on this new section of the agenda called consent. And any senator will have the power to object to an item being consented, in which case it's moved into new business. So essentially, if it's on consent, I'll go to it. I'll say, we are now in the consent section. Does anyone object to moving these forward? And if there is not, we won't even discuss it. We won't introduce it, because I assume that the whole body has taken the time to read it and bring it forward. But if one individual chooses to object, it is moved back into new business and treated as any other piece of legislation. The caveat here is it cannot be used for governing document amendments and budgets, regardless of their sponsorship. So this is a rule. I also added in that I wanted these standing rules to expire subsequent to the adoption of new standing rules in the fall of 2021. I believe that a new speaker and a new Senate should reconsider the rules that they'd like to have and determine what would work best for that body. So I wanted to put a soft end date on these rules, not to leave the undergraduate student government Senate with no rules, but as to encourage future Senates to change the rules. So that is my legislation. Are there any questions on it? Seeing no questions. You know what? I'm actually gonna stop chairing for this and pass it over to Irene if she's okay to do this, because I suppose it isn't right for me to chair and have this be my legislation. So Irene, if you wouldn't mind taking over just temporarily here and running the end of this discussion.
Yeah, sure. Are we in questions?
Yeah, we're in questions, so take it as you'd like to from here.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions on this piece of legislation, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Lakita, go ahead.
So when you say half of all senators like sponsoring a legislation, I think there comes the issue of, do we even have half of all, or like technically senators at the meetings? And so like, would like, rather than saying half of the senators, like if we set a number or something, maybe, or a soft number rather than like saying half the senators, just thinking.
Okay, I'm not inclined to do that, just because I believe that if we are to put something on this consent, half of the body, like the total of what the body should be on there. I want to make it so that this is a piece of legislation that would have a 50% majority to pass, and if we wouldn't have 50% of senators who could vote at that time sponsoring it, then I think it should be discussed like any other piece of legislation. And for that reason, I don't think a lower number is appropriate in this case.
That's fine. And then just my other sort of question is like, sponsoring by all 4 standing committees, like in the event that it's not actually related to the committee itself, like a piece of legislation, let's say comes to AC affairs, has nothing to do with AC affairs, like it wouldn't typically be on discussion. So would it, like if we did like 3 out of 4 committees rather than all 4 committees, considering that like sometimes the committee times, like there's a lot of legislation being discussed at the same time. Would that be all right, or would it have to be that like it has to be by all 4 standing committees?
I
Also,
could
like some meet before Senate and some meet after.
I could consider allowing it to be 3 of the 4 committees, but I do think that in order to have an item put on here, it has to have a high barrier, because I don't want to consent things that not all senators have seen. I say all 4 standing committees because that would mean that theoretically every senator is assigned to a committee. If it passes every committee, that means every senator has seen it and will have an opportunity to have discussed it prior to the Senate meeting. So that's why I put it at 4. If you would like to make an amendment, we can have a bit of discussion on that during discussion.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Lakita. Does anyone else have any questions? Just raise your hand if you do. Okay, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, so how would consent work? Like, let's imagine we have an article of legislation. It gets placed onto this section of the agenda. What happens to the legislation?
So say we're in a session of Senate. Consent will go right here between business and discussion. Once we get to it, I would ask if there's any objection to the particular piece of legislation, and if no one objected, we would just move on and consider it to be passed. If anyone objected, then we would move it up into new business or into business and discuss it there. That's my answer.
Connor, go ahead.
Would it not be better to have it before, as these would all be new pieces of legislation, and by putting it there, they can be dealt with right away? And if anyone objects, they just go into new business and you move in like that.
That's a great idea. I'll just do that instead. Thanks for the advice.
So does that constitute an amendment or no?
I don't think so, because it was left vague in the original thing, but if someone would like to make an amendment to signify that it is before new business in which it would be considered, that could be prudent.
Okay, I don't have a preference, so if somebody would like to make that motion, just raise your hand, but otherwise we'll just proceed. Okay, Lakita, are you raising your hand to make the motion?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know the exact wording, but if you could add in there that the agenda item known as consent shall be introduced after, I think it's after reports, right? Because there's reports and then it's new business. Or would it be right after old business? Let me just look at what the agenda is right now. Voting items. Actually, yeah, it would be shall be right after reports.
And Luis, you take it as friendly. You're muted.
I do.
Okay, great. Katie, do you have a comment on the amendment?
No, that's a later hand. Sorry.
Okay, gotcha. No worries. All right, so considering that Luis is taking this as friendly, we'll just move on from there. So Katie, if you wanted to make your comment, go ahead. Or actually question, we're still on questions.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a question and comment, it's like a merge of both. I was wondering if we can add something about having at least one of the authors present to present at the committees when they go to do this. Part of that stemming from Lakita's concern that something could come, let's say, I'll just use ACT as an example, something could come to ACT that like I have no idea what it is, and then if no authors are there and people have questions, so I'm wondering if adding something that mandates at least one of the authors has to be there to present at like a committee that it might not be related. Yeah, that's just a suggestion.
I'm inclined to not go forward with that particular line of thought, because this is Senate standing rules and not kind of like for the committees. I encourage all of the directors of their committees to not accept a piece of legislation to be considered in this capacity if the author is unwilling to show up, or a author is unwilling to show up. to present it. That's kind of my thought on that. If you would like to make if an amendment, we can discuss it more, but that's kind of my initial feelings there.
Katie, would you like to make an amendment? I can see your hands up, but I can't tell if it's from before.
No, it was from before.
Okay, great. And Damani, I noticed your hand went up. Is it all resolved now? I will take that as a yes. Okay, so with that being said, we will now move into discussion. So if you have something to say, just raise your hand and I can call on you. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up, so oh, I am. Lakita, go ahead.
Sorry, I guess I would like to motion to change 4 to. I'm kind of stuck between 2 and 3 right now, and I guess like I don't know if we could open discussion on this, or it would have to be proposed and then discussion opens, but essentially if disbursement of senators was equal between all 4 committees, then it would really only need to go to 2 of the 4 committees. But if 3 is felt more appropriate, I can change it to 3 rather than 2. Or whatever I motion, I guess.
Luis, what do you think?
I think that I'm going to take either as unfriendly. And whichever I'd be more comfortable with 3 than 2 is kind of my only thing I'll say there.
I'll make the motion still for 3 then in that case.
Okay, and Luis, you're taking that as unfriendly or friendly?
Unfriendly.
Okay, so is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so in that case, we put this to a vote, right? We vote on
So in this case, you can enter into brief discussion on the amendment and then into a vote, or you could move right into a vote if that is your desire.
that? Okay, I think we should go into discussion for a moment. I can see some hands up. So Janina, is your hand up also for discussion or just for the motion?
Yeah, it's for discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
I genuinely am inclined to say 3 standing committees because in my time in AC, I'm thinking about legislation like the withdrawal legislation or discussion on pass-fail, and I don't see these topics like relevant to say external, like just as an example. And I wouldn't want. I feel like these are kind of topics that the majority of students are advocating for, and if this was under consent and someone was against it, they would just say it then. And I'm more inclined to say 3 than 4.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I am thinking about what that 1/2 of all senators means, right? So if all the senators are evenly distributed across committees, which is not always the case, but assuming that they are, then anything would only have to pass each committee by 50%, right? So if you get 50% of each of the committees, then in theory you have 50% of the senators. Now it could and often does pass by, larger margins than that. But I think if we're going to say 1/2 in one place, then I think that the corollary to that is all 4 of the standing committees. I also think that to get onto the consent section of the agenda, which would essentially allow the Senate to adopt something without discussing it at all, we should make every effort to put it in front of every senator before it comes to the meeting. So I'm speaking against the amendment.
Okay, thank you, Damani. Ben, go ahead.
I am also speaking against the amendment. To elaborate on what Damani said, I'm going to pull out my math major card right now and say, if you only get a majority on 3 of the 4 standing committees, then you could theoretically pass with around 38% of senators. And that is not a majority. And therefore, if you have 38% of senators, even assuming equally distributed, which we know is not the case, if you have 38% of senators supporting you, that is not a guarantee that this will pass. I think this is supposed to be things for which it is a given that it will, most definitely pass. And getting 3 out of 4 standing committees is not that. I would also respond to what Janana said about how there are issues that students are advocating for. We already consider a lot of issues that students are advocating for, and there is a place for that, and that's new business, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing right now. That's what we do all the time in Senate. What this is specifically about, I think, and Louise, correct me if I'm mistaking your purpose here, but what this is about is it's about simplifying the Senate's agenda so that things that are, obviously going to pass don't need to be held up to quite that same level of scrutiny, because we already know that a majority of senators are in support of it. And so for that reason, I am against this amendment.
Okay, thank you, Ben. So I'm going to cap discussion after Janana, so I can see that Lakita, Mike, and Janana, that's our order, and then we'll cap it there. So Lakita, go ahead.
Is it fine if I speak last?
Yeah, that's fine. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was originally in support of the legislation as it's written, but I like to speak against this amendment that's being made because I think that in order to really get a sense of consent, as it's being called on the agenda, I really do think it has to be presented to all four committees. And I think the original exigence and the original argument for this legislation was calling for that. So for those reasons, I'm opposed to this amendment. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you, Mike. All right, I'm going to now call on Janana, and then we'll have Lakita, and then we'll cap it there.
Yeah, I understand what everyone else is saying. My line of thought was that it's bringing up issues to committees that may not necessarily have may not be in its jurisdiction, I guess, may have been irrelevant to that committee, but if everyone feels that 4 is better than 3, I don't mind.
Thank you, Janana. All right, Lakita, go ahead.
So, I understand what everyone's saying, and but I also want to say, I feel like we're jumping the gun there. The whole point of the consent agenda is that a significant amount of people have seen it, and we are all consenting to it just being passed by unanimous consent, which happens to some of the legislation that we have presented on Senate floor, which is the whole point of the creation of the consent agenda. And so I don't think it's unfair to say that senators aren't going to see the legislation unless it's presented in committee and voted on by committee, because the whole point of our job is to actually view the legislation before Senate and make sure that we understand what's going on before coming to these meetings. So regardless if it's on the consent agenda, we're going to see it at our meetings, right? And just speaking from honestly a committee a deputy perspective, right? I feel like there are times in the week or certain weeks where there's a lot to discuss, and discussing something that has to do with other committees, it's a great thing, but it also takes away from other issues that the committees specifically are looking at. And I'll bring up services as an example. They have so many subcommittees and task forces that maybe talking about ACT related material and external related material, it might not be the best use of their time. And isn't that the whole reason why we have different committees for all these things, and we as a Senate body are meeting here? If we don't truly consent, then there is a clear process to just bring it to let's talk about it like a normal thing. But if we all have the ability to look at it and we see it and we consent to it, why does it matter if it's going to 3 of the 4 standing committees? In fact, I would even say, why can't just one committee itself put it on the consent agenda, and then we as Senate can say, no, we don't want that on the consent agenda, and move it to an actual vote? I'm not going that far, but typically in other settings, I have seen committees literally put their items on consent agendas and it be voted that way without it going to multiple committees. And so I guess that's where my whole rationale for 3 out of 4, I honestly was thinking 2, I'm fine with 3, but it still just feels like redundancy having it repeated in different floors when some of these things are very specific to one specific committee. And we as senators have the ability to view the legislation at any time on the agenda itself and reach out to the authors with questions and concerns and whatnot.
Okay, thank you, Lakita. And so now I'm going to yield back to the author, Louise, if you'd like to say anything before I move into a vote.
So I think that my position on this is generally the same. I just kind of want to add one caveat based on the last speech there. I think that it's very important, and I think that any legislation, we're not changing any sponsorship requirements here. Any legislation can go to Senate with one committee sponsorship. This is meant to be an exemption to that, not the standard. So if someone wants to go through the effort of going to all the committees and all the committees believe it's a cause worth pursuing, I believe it should have a special spot on the agenda, and that's kind of the barrier for which I foresee. I encourage senators to vote the way they feel, and that's all I'll say on that. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we've capped the discussion just for the sake of time. So if your hand is up, please just put it down. And we are now going to vote on this amendment. So you will all excuse me if I'm a little rusty on the voting component, even though all of this time in internal should have taught me a lot better by now. But if someone will guide me through this, Louise, please. What do I click on to call in? Oh,
I did it. I don't know if
thank you.
that's right, but
Yes, that's much better.
yeah.
Okay, so it looks like we have 2 minutes. So if you could all just please vote and then we'll move on.
This is a vote on the amendment only, correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
There are 3 people who have not yet voted, so please, oh well, 4 rather. So please, if you are one of those 4 people, please vote.
I don't have a submit button currently.
That's unfortunate. What is your intended vote, if I might inquire?
Against the amendment.
You are against the amendment. All right, I will include that in the tally.
Thank you.
All right. The vote is concluded. In a vote of 9 to... Oh wait, it's being stupid. All right. In a vote of 9 to 13 to 3, this amendment fails. And I'll turn it back over to the Deputy Speaker to continue chairing for the rest of discussion here.
Thank you, Luis. Okay, so let me just bring down the participant list. If you have an additional comment for discussion, just raise your hand. We can continue. Neha, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask about like internal. Like internal isn't considered like a real committee, right? So it can't be like you pass it through internal development services and like external could say it's not academic related. That doesn't count, right? Just to clarify.
If I may, Irene.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. I probably should have asked this earlier, but like now I'm reading and thinking.
No worries, no worries. Internal is not one of the 4 standing committees. Internal is considered a secondary committee. So internal would not count to these 4 committee number.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
Does anyone else have a comment for discussion? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move to pass this legislation. I would move to, oh, Braden, go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand function for a second.
You're all good.
So this is like a comment slash question. Because this would be put on consent, we would not discuss this like at all, right?
So it could be discussed if anyone objected, but otherwise I would just ask if there's an objection. It wouldn't be discussed outside of the inquiry as to whether someone objects to it passing.
Okay, so I guess my comment is Senate meetings are open to the public and anyone is allowed to speak. So, but they are not allowed to vote or in this case object. So if someone from I know this doesn't happen often, but like it happened a lot at the last emergency Senate. If someone wanted to speak on a bill that was on the consent calendar, where would they speak, I guess?
I'd recommend that they speak in public comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Braden. Does anyone else have something I'd like to add? Okay, so I'm not seeing any more comments, so we're just going to move into a vote now. Luis, would you like to create the poll?
Sure, give me a moment. I have to save the old poll first.
Yeah, sounds good.
Should be open now.
And just to clarify for everyone, we are now voting on the legislation, not the amendment.
Thank you for that. Honestly, I was like, hold up.
I feel like these days we have to clarify everything just to be safe, you know?
So we have the majority of the results, and let's see. No, the remaining results are relevant. So we'll wait the remaining minute. I think that I'm going to decrease the time on future polls to a minute because we have the overwhelming majority of results in by then. So I think that will be the case for future polls. If anyone objects to that, like, it's not a big deal. I can keep it at 2 minutes. I don't particularly care, but say so, you know. All right, so in a vote of 20 to 1 to 3, this amendment to the Student Body Senate standing rules passes. Thank you, Irene, for stepping in, seeing as this was my legislation and I didn't want to hold the floor as the author. Let me just do that. And save quickly. While I am saving, would the authors of one moment, I lost my place on the agenda. Would the authors of an amendment to the election bylaws of the undergraduate student government care to introduce this legislation while I go about messing with the poll?
Absolutely, I will. So this is essentially, y'all remember when I wrote a bunch of legislation, basically sticking the chief diversity officer into the bylaws because it was a new position and we hadn't done it yet. It appears I forgot somewhere. So This arised out of there are election related restrictions on the president, vice president, and comptroller, but no similar restrictions on the CDO. I believe that was an oversight. In fact, I know it was an oversight because I did all the other changes. And along the way, I realized that this specific bylaw is actually worded kind of unclearly, to the point where it's not entirely clear in the bylaws if a presidential candidate can endorse the vice president running with them, which doesn't seem right. So I rewrote it. And now it basically says that candidates can endorse themselves and their running mates, but that otherwise and in general, a sitting president, vice president, comptroller, or CDO cannot endorse anyone running for that role. That's it.
Are there any questions for Senator Keelty on this legislation? Seeing none, and if there is some, but I'm just not seeing it in the hands, please unmute yourself and say so. Seeing none, are there any points of discussion on this legislation? Fabio.
Yeah, hi. So I just have to take my chance here. Since I was, even back when I was a senator in my sophomore year, I thought that this was one of the worst policies in the election bylaws. That may be the unpopular opinion, but I kind of thought people should have the right to endorse people. And I've always thought that because that's how it is in the real world. So just throwing that out there since it was my chance before I graduate to say that. But otherwise, I do think it was important for the CDO to be included here since everyone else is. So thank you.
Neha.
That was a good point, Fabio. Claps to that, because in the real world you do like promote candidates. Maybe that's flawed, but people do have Instagram campaigns and people do repost them, and I don't know, I feel like it's natural to promote people, but like you said, if everyone else is included, I think the CDO should be included because it is on that list of like, people that are nominated by the student body and like hold, a position of power. But good point, Fabio, and I'll remember that as a sophomore.
Senator Keelty.
So first of all, I can say that I'm not necessarily opposed to that opinion. I think that there is definitely a good intention in the way that this bylaw is written, in that the president, VP, and comptroller hold some sort of power, and therefore can exert some influence. At the same time, I think that free speech is important, and I would encourage either Fabio or Neha to make an to suggest an amendment that would strike bylaw 15.4 entirely. I will take it as unfriendly, and then we can have a fantastic discussion about it, because I would love the Senate to vote on that as its own issue. So if anyone wants to do that, now is a great time to do that.
Are there any further points of discussion or motions at this time? We'll go to Fabio first, yeah.
So, Luis, you may be expecting me to make the amendment, but I'm not. So here's what I will say. I think with this election right upon us, it's probably not wise to change this election bylaw right now. And I don't want to sway the Senate that way. If I were a senator here, I think you all should vote in favor of this to fix the issue with the CDO. And perhaps once this election passes, you can delve into the election bylaws, and I'd be happy to help with that before I graduate. But again, I think it wouldn't be wise to make that amendment right now.
Before I go back to you, Neha, I'm gonna go to the people who haven't spoken yet. So I'm gonna first go to Braden and then Caleb.
Fabio, going off of Fabio's point, I also don't think it'd be very wise to completely get rid of this close to an election. But could we maybe include a therefore be it resolved clause that this would take effect at the conclusion of this election? Like, I just don't know.
That could be
Maybe-
done.
Oh, okay. Then I'd like to motion to completely remove this bylaw and make it effective at the conclusion of the election.
Let me write something about that.
Okay. I will accept your motion. So your motion is to strike the current line and have a therefore be it resolved clause that bylaw 15.4 is repealed and repealed following the completion of the spring 2021 election.
Does anyone know the date of that election?
I think it's March 4th. Pretty sure.
It's March 2nd at noon to March 4th at noon. That was Josh.
Make it effective on March 5th, Ben, just for... Can we not use the exact date? Sorry, this is a little bit less formal than we're used to here. But can we just say following the completion of the election? Because should there be election violations and someone is to campaign after the fact, like I just don't want any potential confusion there. The specific date might cause issues. All right. And then also strike the clause above it, Ben. And then
Oh, I was under the impression that we would have the chief diversity officer like have that restriction put in to make it fair for now, and then we just get rid of it entirely. Is that not, Brayden? Is that, did you want to strike
Brayden,
the
this
entire
is your
clause?
motion. Feel free to make it either way you'd like.
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Do you want, as a part of your motion, do you want to keep the thing with the chief diversity officer where because president, VP, and comptroller aren't allowed to endorse for this next election, we also make CDO a part of that list?
If that's possible, that would probably be the best way to do it, where it's like, right now, no one can do it, so let's make sure that no one can do it, and then following the election.
Great.
I don't even know how you write that, but...
So I think that what he has is that. What Senator Guilty has written here is
Speaker,
Eduardo? Yes, sorry, I didn't hear what you said there.
can you see the raised hands by the CDO, the Chief Justice, and the parliamentarian?
I can, and I was going to get to them after we've clarified what this motion is as a
Okay,
motion to
yeah,
express.
that's what I was asking, because I think their input is important in this amendment.
I will be sure to call on them after we have clarity on what the nature of the amendment is exactly.
Okay, cool.
So for Brayden and Senator Keelty, this is the amendment that we're forwarding here. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. We are now in discussion on this amendment. Damani, you shall speak first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to speak in strong support of this. In a conversation with Senator Keelty, I had actually argued the other side of this, but then in talking with him, he convinced me. I think it is very important that we correctly include the CDO in the same category that we currently hold the president, vice president, and comptroller. And just to be totally clear, I'm saying that as the sitting CDO. And I also think that, you know, if we're going to do away with it in the future, I like that idea. So, but of course, after this election, and keep the rules uniform for the 4 executives during this election. So I'll yield.
Thank you, Damani. Caleb, feel free to speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to say first that I am in support of this legislation as a whole, but I did want to inform everyone that immediately following this election, the Elections Oversight Commissioner and I, along with the judiciary, will be doing a comprehensive overwrite of the entire election policy bylaw. So this amendment is going to be a little bit superfluous, but you know, I just wanted to make everybody aware of that. If you wish to push through the amendment anyway, that's your prerogative, but now you know. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. Neha.
What does superfluous mean? I can't even spell it to look it up.
It means that it will already be accomplished. It would be redundant. It'll already be covered.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I rose my hand in the beginning to just second whatever Fabio wanted because I was down for this debate. I kind of just wanted to know where Senate stood, because I think this is a really interesting thing. Like, I just wanted to know, like, I'm currently like in the middle, so I'm speaking like a middleman. I see both points. I agree that if we are going to have people not speak, it should be these people. But I agree, like, we're students. This is the undergraduate and student government. We're the ones that are in Senate, in USG, and the ones who, are in leadership of USG, and people do look to us to ask who we're promoting. And one-on-one conversations, and I'm going to be honest, we tell one-on-one who we're promoting most of the time, or we tell one-on-one, like, oh, this person's running. We kind of know. And so I feel like just being open to having them promote whoever, saying who they're voting for or who people should vote for is like natural. People do it. And so shout out to Fabio for bringing it up and sparking this very nice debate.
Thank you, Neha. I'm going to cap the speakers list where it is, and then we'll move into a vote after this. So we'll go to Mitch, and then we'll close with Senator Keelty.
Hey guys, what is up? I kind of by coincidence, I was kind of gonna almost say the same thing as Neha a second ago. When I'm sitting here, I'm both torn. I fully agree. If we were gonna limit folks from doing this, it should probably be this list. But I guess I'm leaning towards, honestly, I think kind of with some of the points that were brought up earlier, that I think folks should be able to endorse whoever they may like. They might be holding an elected office already, but I think their endorsement either carries. I think it's important that students might see who a current person in any of these roles may endorse, because I think it just makes sense, and I wouldn't want to see anyone hampered by not being able to hear the opinions of the folks that are involved in the USG and whatnot that may occur in whatever administration. And so if an administration or somebody from an administration endorses somebody, that carries some importance no matter from whatever lens of that past administration. I think that could be important for the student body to see and hear where they are feeling. No matter what position we're talking about, if we're talking about president, vice president, the comptroller, or the CDO, and kind of having that discussion, or not that discussion, that viewpoint shared, because I think, again, no matter what, these conversations are going to happen in private, and they might spread regardless. And rather than somebody being, I don't know, not being allowed to do that, or doing so like mistakenly or whatever, I don't know. Like, I see where Ben and folks are coming from, but I guess this being the undergraduate student government, I think I'm in favor of allowing people to be able to say whatever they may like and endorse whoever they may like. It might make some campaigns tougher. It might make some campaigns easier, but I think that in all fairness, I think endorsements should be allowed. Yeah. And I guess I kind of worked that through in my own head tonight, because I wasn't sure where I stood on this. But yeah, okay. I guess I don't know. I thought I had another point, but I think I lost it. So that's just my take. All right, guys.
Thank you, Mitch. All right, Ben, feel free to close discussion here, then we'll move into a vote.
Yeah, I took this amendment as unfriendly, not because I didn't support it, but because I didn't want this to be unilateral. I wanted the Senate to come to an agreement, because it's a fairly major change that we'd be making to our bylaws. However, I support this change and I support this amendment. Ultimately it is the students' choice, the students at large, who we elect, but the students look to leaders for opinions. My friends have already asked me my opinion on the presidential race and the comptroller's race. Not yet on the CDO race. I'm pretty sure only one person is running so far, but I'm not entirely sure on that. And I've given them, and the reason that they ask me my opinion is that they know that I'm in USG. They know that I pay attention to these things, and they trust my judgment. There are a lot of people for whom the president, vice president, CDO, and comptroller are those people. And like a lot of people have already said, these conversations already happen behind closed doors. I'd also like to make it clear that there is a separate bylaw for anyone who might be concerned about this. There is a separate bylaw prohibiting the EOC and members of the judiciary from making endorsements. I think that that's appropriate. I think that that should stay. And the reason is that those members are the ones who are actually overseeing this election. Having them do endorsements, I think, would be a severe conflict of interest. But the president, VP, CDO, and comptroller are not involved in election administration. They are, at the end of the day, just students, and frankly, students with a lot of knowledge who we should be listening to when it comes to making important decisions. And so for that reason, I would urge you all to vote in favor of this amendment, and I will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Keelty. We will now open the poll on this matter. Please vote the way you want. As I said last time, I decreased the time to a minute, so vote quickly, please. If you have an issue with voting, feel free to say so. Feel free to email represent or reach out on the group me, or if you have my number, feel free to text me as well. Like I'm willing to give that out, just not while the meeting's being recorded.
Just to clarify, Luis, we are now voting not on the whole thing, but the highlighted in the orange reddish, right?
We're just voting on the suggestion on the document right now. I'm going to discourage future legislation from starting with the words "an amendment" because that's how I signify when we amend something on the floor, and it gets rather confusing. So this is not on the bill as a whole. This is on specifically the
amendment to the amendment.
Yes. All right. Our vote totals here come to 15 to 2 to 2. So this amendment passes. Congratulations to those who proposed it. We will now continue with Ben. Accept your wait. I can accept it too. I just have everyone's face in the way. Ben. Oh, why did I say that? All right. We will now continue with discussion on this piece of legislation. That's probably why I said Ben. I thought that you raised your hand again, Ben. So. We will. Are there any further points of discussion? I think we're about ready for that recess that Senate takes 2 hours in. So we'll take that after we conclude this legislation. Are there any further points of discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to move to forward this legislation by unanimous consent. Are there any objections to doing so? Mitch. Is this an objection?
Yeah, I think.
Okay. Perfect. So now we will move into a vote. Seeing as there was an objection, let me just save the previous vote first. 2/10/21. Four. All right. We will now edit the question. Oh. And the new poll is now open. There is also a minute to complete this poll. All right, there are 9 seconds remaining and 4 people who have not started the poll. If you're one of the 4, please start the poll. All right, in a vote of 17 to 3 to 1, this piece of legislation passes. Next on the agenda, we have a bill concerning the establishment of a Middle Eastern Cultural Center on UConn's campuses. But before we get to that, we are going to take a 3-minute recess. We'll reconvene at 8:06. Feel free to stand up, get water, take a little bit of a break. We've been going at it for about an hour and a half now. Be ready to reconvene in 3 minutes. You're welcome to stay and chat. I'll leave the room open, but I'm going to go get myself some more water. So if you have any questions or concerns, save them for when I get back. I'll leave my camera on.
Say hi. You have to say hi.
You know, I
Wait,
wasn't
was
gonna
that your
mention.
cat?
Who's got a cat?
I just saw a cat, but I was too late.
I wasn't. I've been thinking about getting a cat, but I grew up with like hypoallergenic dogs, so I'm not used to dog hair. And everything I hear about cat hair is it gets in your food and stuff, and that would really freak me out.
It does. Like there are times I'll be eating cereal and I'm like, yeah, this is not my hair.
That would really freak me out. But you know, like, is it worth it for the buddy? I don't know.
Oh,
I know.
Fabio, when
are
you
you
were
allergic?
What?
Are you allergic?
No. I just there's some, you know, some things like we all can't handle. I wouldn't be able to, if it ended up in my food, I couldn't handle that. Like, you know, like I can't handle a lab. My friend has a chocolate lab and I pet it and my hand is covered in hair. Like I look like I don't know, I look and I just I don't know. So I imagine cat hair. But you know, like what are you gonna do?
Gotcha.
I wasn't
May
gonna
I cut you off?
I wasn't going to mention that funding. I wasn't going to mention that election law because I thought it was going to be heavily unpopular. But I said, screw it. You know, I'm graduating in May. When I ran for student body president, I don't know if you all knew that. I ran my sophomore year and I lost miserably and dragged on and dragged on.
Fabio, you're just like, I love the candid you. Keep going.
Yeah, and I lost miserably and dragged on the election for like 5 weeks because I filed all these appeals and violations. And I was
Wasn't that
gonna...
against and Wawa?
No, that was against Priyanka.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Manny. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
So, you know, I was going to be that person that won in my head by getting these violations, getting everybody disqualified, which with that worked well. But I have hated that election policy forever. And I said, you know, I didn't like it. So I'm glad to see that my opinion was shared.
I'm glad you shared your opinion, Fabio, because you gave us an example of a nice little debate in Senate. The author was like half and half. I felt like everyone was like making up their mind as they were talking and then realized like, no, I think we should go with this. And it honestly won by a good amount. So I'm happy you brought it up.
It was a good debate for Senate. Yeah, it was.
All I can say is that someone running for the daily campus, it was a lot of fun to take some notes on.
Wait, you're a writer for the Daily Campus?
Yeah.
What's
Greg
up?
knows things about us.
I was tempted to say something like the public comments, or like the public comments at the start, but I wasn't sure if like, that was appropriate to say like, "Hi, I'm a writer for the Daily Campus."
That is so appropriate. If you ever want to introduce yourself and like you want to come and introduce yourself in public comment, like say your favorite animal, say your favorite color, what year you are, you're free and welcome to do so.
I mean, I do think it depends on what you end up writing. Right? Like
Sam, Sam, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Does your mom teach at the Academy of Aerospace and Engineering?
She does.
Oh, who?
Wait, who?
Oh, I'm guessing Damani knows.
Dr. B.
Dr.
Oh my
B?
God, you're Dr. B. Oh my God. Dr. B hated me and then loved me. I'm not gonna lie. You could ask her about us.
If you want to, I can get a list of names of people that want to say hi to her.
Yeah,
Say
Ben
Neva.
Kilty. She kicked me out of class once.
She kicked me out of class a couple of times.
for
She almost ripped
singing.
up my. Yeah, she's great. I honestly hated physics, but I learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot.
I loved Dr. B, but I could never tell if she either really loved me or really hated me, and I could never tell
She
which
was
one.
she was really pro woman, and like I definitely effed with that. And so like by the time I was a senior and actually started liking physics, like we were tight.
She helped me with a physics class while I was here.
I mean, she helped me get through physics 1502 here, so.
Oh my God, I cannot believe you're Dr. B's son. That's
Damani, how did you know that?
How did you know?
She told me.
Her daughter went to
We're friends on
UConn,
Facebook.
too.
We chat.
Yeah, and
Oh,
yeah, my
okay.
brother and my sister went here.
Yeah, because your sister was here like what, 4 years ago at UConn?
She graduated in 2019, but
Wasn't she a sub at AAE last year? I feel like she was.
I don't know. I just remember finding her on Facebook.
oh yeah, you know what's best, Damani? My brother is now a facilitator for the distance learning.
Oh my gosh, that's
That's cool.
awesome. Yeah, because in AE, guess how much you make a week? $110 a day, about $550 a week being a facilitator in schools.
Wow.
I know my brother says it's good money.
Yeah. But nice to chat with you, Sam. If you ever want to talk in public comment, feel free to.
I will also make sure that you guys all know that you guys all say hi to her.
Yeah,
Unless you say something mean, in which case you're not invited back.
No, I would never.
You're invited to every session of the Student Senate. It's open to the public. Just a note there. We're gonna close this recess. I'm glad you all had a nice time chatting. And we are going to move into the next agenda item. I hope everyone's back. So with that, we will yield to the authors of this legislation to present it. If either of them are here, they're welcome to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, USG Senate. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. My name is Mateen Karimi. I'm an undergraduate senior studying business management. My colleague, Noor Taweh, was unable to make the meeting. Right now, she had another meeting going on. She's also a senior. She's studying human rights and physiology and neurobiology, if I'm getting that right. I won't go through the details of the legislation, but I'll just give a brief overview of the structure. There's three main components. The first one concerning the motivations behind starting a center. The second one, the research concerning the experiences of students on the campus. And then finally, the objectives of the legislation. I encourage folks to take a look at the sponsors. These are folks that we sat down with over Zoom during the pandemic, of course, and received verbal support and guidance. Good news is Noor and I are submitting an actual formal proposal to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion by the end of this month. We're open to questions, comments, and criticism. I love to hear the criticism, so I encourage it. And I'll yield to the speaker.
Thank you very much. We're now in the question section of debate. So if there are any questions for the authors, feel free to ask now. Neha, I saw your hand up with question.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll get to you first once we get into discussion. Are there any questions, though, in the meantime? Seeing no questions, we'll go right to Neha then. Feel free to posit your point of discussion.
Love this. I've been waiting for this since day one. Whenever I go into the cultural center and I go into ASAC and I do see an underrepresentation of the Middle Eastern students on campus, we have a large portion of them and no place for them to feel at home. So I've been wanting this for so long. I remember talking to people that were pushing it when I was a freshman. I know of Noor very well because I know her boyfriend, and I'm really happy to see this legislation so beautifully written. So great to see your face. Come back whenever. I hope this passes very easily, and I cannot wait to see this become a thing by the time I graduate, because I really think it should. So I was like clapping, smiling, seeing this. So kudos to you for bringing it to us, and thank you for doing so.
Thank you. Inshallah. Inshallah, we'll have a Middle Eastern Cultural Center. So.
We'll then go to Ben.
I also wanted to speak in favor of this amendment. I think it's really impressive that the sponsors list, especially getting UConn faculty on board with this. This was clearly a really well thought out proposal. And I also just want to thank you, because it's not all that often that we get people from outside USG to come and kind of give us their ideas and ask for our support on this. And I know that sometimes USG can be a lot. And so I just wanted to thank you guys for sticking with it and bringing this amazing piece of legislation to us.
We'll now go to Zoe.
I just want to add on to the support as well. You know, at NACP, we've faced a fair share of obstacles in becoming a cultural center, and we're still on the path to do that. So you always have our support. I know you've been in contact with Sage a lot. So yeah, I just think it's great.
Thank you. Mike, feel free to go ahead. Or President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, thank you. I would also like to thank all the people that worked on this legislation. I was able to witness only part of the journey to get to this legislation, and the journey yet to come after this, but I have no doubt that many things will come out of this legislation, and I just want to congratulate all the people who worked on it. I yield my time.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any further points of discussion before we move into a vote on this piece of legislation? Ethan.
Thanks. I was just, again, just I suppose pile on. Congratulations. Thanks for bringing it here. My question is, could you explain the process even that goes into making additional center? To your knowledge, do you know what the process is, and what are the next steps after this besides submitting that official request to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion? I hope you could explain it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. Right now, Nora and I are in the process of submitting a proposal to them, which will outline a timeline, a budget, location, and objectives. That's the bare minimum. In terms of next steps, when we first started this project, I started this since my sophomore year in college, and then it kind of died off. And then senior year, I tried to make it my senior thesis. So I have a reason to work on it. And we met with Dr. Tuitt, if you guys are familiar with him, early in the semester, and he told us that we need to meet with lots of faculty and students first to get a sense of the enthusiasm behind the center and what they would like it to look like. So to answer your question, the first step is this proposal. There could be a possibility that it gets rejected, and that's fine. This is a long-term process. Most likely, the big thing they're concerned about is budget, especially with COVID-19. It's impacted the university significantly. So it's a big question mark. But first, right now, we're pursuing the proposal.
Thank you for answering that question, and thank you to Ethan for asking it. We'll now move to Mitch.
Oh, honestly, my question was very similar to Ethan's, and I think it was kind of answered. So I'd just like to second my support. I meant to put my hand down. I apologize.
No worries, no worries. We'll go to Zoe now.
I just wanted to kind of add on and kind of share our experience as well at NACP, and kind of also state that there is no set framework, and that's something that we've really been trying to change on our end. And I know the Middle Eastern Student Association has also been advocating for that as well, because there is no easy process to go through it. Sometimes it can be pretty cyclical as far as, meeting standards set forth by administration, and those standards often vary based on what population they're looking at. I know for, Native and Indigenous students, something we've been continuously blockaded with is this idea of having not a large enough population on campus. And I just find the whole idea, this is a little tangent, but the whole idea of, you're not valid unless you reach a certain amount of students ridiculous. But those are just some of the obstacles we've faced as well. So there is no set path as of now.
Thank you, Zoe. Lakita.
Okay, so I just want to begin by saying, continue what everyone else has been. Congratulations on this. Looking at the list, I can't even begin to imagine the number of meetings. But I guess my question is sort of in regards to the survey part of the clauses. Are you what would the survey essentially be used for? Is sort of my question.
Yeah, great question. And this is something we had conversations with Dr. Leibel, who's the director of human rights. We noticed, so I guess a little backstory. Here's the good news. Office of Enrollment, Planning and Management at UConn finally is asking students whether or not they identify as Middle Eastern in their applications to UConn. They did it for the first time for this entering class of 2024. So in a couple of years, we'll have a better picture of what the UConn Stores campus and the regional campuses look like. And the reason why that's important is because what we've noticed from the initial data, and that's only a snapshot on what you see there, a significant number of students who identify as Middle Eastern are on the regional campuses. So that may impact the structure of the center, outreach, where it's located, but that's an ongoing conversation. So I hope I answered your question.
Oh, yeah, no, you did. Sorry.
Thank you for that question and that answer. Are there any other further points of discussion before we move into a vote? I suppose I shall also solicit motions at this time. So if there's a motion, I can also accept that. Seeing no points of discussion or motions, I'm going to move to forward this by unanimous consent. Does anyone object to forwarding this by unanimous consent? Seeing no objections, it is so moved. Congratulations to the authors and all those who put work into it. It is an impressive list of sponsors.
Thank you guys.
Of course. I will be enacting it and sending it over to the president later tonight. So we'll have a finished signed copy for you hopefully by the end of the week. We'll now move into addressing USG's response to past and future acts of bias-related incidents. And I will yield to the author of this legislation to present it.
Hello. Sorry, it took me a second there. I I forgot that I was the author on it. But essentially, here's what this is. Over the past couple of weeks, so starting in December, we passed a piece of legislation similar to this, calling on the university to reassess the way in which it responds to and speaks out about bias and world events that have impacts to students here on our campus. And then over the break, we had a couple meetings. When I say we, I'm referring to then Senator Sam Zellin, Josh Crow, Christina. So I'm sorry, Christine, myself, and Dory Jacobs, who is the president of Hillel, talking with the university about different ways that the university should address acts of bias. And part of what they gave back to us is a rubric, which is the third footnote. And what I want to do is, based on conversations that we in USG have been having over the past couple of weeks about when, how, and if we should be issuing statements and to whom, and what those kind of looks like, is to take that and adapt it for our own use so that we can have a better understanding of how we move forward. So essentially what this legislation does is it says that this is our priority and says that we're going to come up with something by the end of this semester so that we can have a framework to use as we move forward. So I'll yield to questions.
Are there any questions for the Chief Diversity Officer on this legislation? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself if you have a question at this time. Seeing no questions, I'll move into discussion. Are there any points of discussion on this legislation? President Hernandez, you are recognized.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to thank the authors for adding an accent to my last name. That was very kind. Just wanted to publicly acknowledge him for that. I yield.
Thank you. Are there any further points of discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to move to forward this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections? If so, please unmute yourself or raise your hand now. If there are not, we'll consider this passed and move forward. Seeing no objections, it is so moved and this has been passed unanimously. We will now move into a statement regarding the Connecticut Commitment Fund. And I will yield to the authors of this legislation to present it now.
You
Go
can
ahead,
go
Nay.
first, Neha, and everything.
Okay, so I'm just gonna say why we started doing this, the process of doing it, and then those who worked on it with us, because me and Darren wrote it, but we did have a lot of people who worked on it with us, so I do want to acknowledge them. So, first off, we've been having a lot of discussions about like funds and budgets, and me and Darren were talking like, you know what, the number one thing that we really want to work with and funding and budgeting is a CT commitment fund. So the CT commitment fund was with donations. It was about $700,000 the first year, and it's projected to be more, but that was the first year. I think it was only done for a year or two, but it gives free tuition to those whose parents or parent makes under $50,000. So it makes it accessible for students from lower income families, and it's going to increase our diversity pool in from lower income families and people of color as well. So this was a really big stride for UConn. And then with COVID-19, it had to sadly stop or be paused rather. And so this is a legislation that me and Darren wanted to discuss because we put forward because we really want this to come back. We really want UConn to prioritize this. I do know that UConn's budget has gotten a lot smaller with COVID, but I don't think it's the lack of money. I think it's the lack of priority, in my opinion, and that's what me and Darren kind of agreed to. So this is just putting out a legislation to prioritize the CT Commitment Fund because it is something Tomcat pushed in his first year here, saying that this is one thing he's going to do, one of his initiatives to increase our diversity pool and stuff. So just urging for it to be continued. And Noah Frank helped a lot with this because I know he did a lot of research about this. And I know Mike Cerulli and Michael Hernandez made some edits to it too. So thank you all for, helping us with this and making this a better legislation. And then Darren, you can go too.
It seems as if you covered everything. I won't be redundant and or repeating anything, but I will stress that the CT Commitment Fund is almost a necessity when it comes to these things, especially when it comes to increasing our diversity here, because we all know of the economic gap between the races within America and whatnot. I personally relied on the CT Commitment Fund to get into UConn and pay for it, so I know how important it is to me and other people who've had it, and I know how important it was to some of my friends back in high school who won't have the same opportunity that I had. In regards to that, I think that this is something that should be on UConn's radar, especially during these trying times.
So this is having some. Oh, looks like he's back. Okay, never mind.
Hello, is it working now? Okay. I'm gonna try. If I cut out, Irene, just go ahead and take over. Yeah, no, my internet for both of your speeches was cut off there, and I was only hearing bits and pieces. So feel free to just go ahead otherwise. Are there any questions for the authors at this time? Kevin.
What does the current marketing look like for the Connecticut Commitment Fund?
Neha, go
I'm just
right
going to
ahead.
respond to that. If anyone has a better answer, please feel free, even if you aren't an author of this legislation. But right now, so it is all made up of donations. And the reason why I specified like finding funds and more donations is because I think that this could be funded through other means. But currently, or before it was paused, it was by donation. So they just marketed to probably their big donors and got people to donate to this. I don't know about their like current marketing, but I think it could be better because they said that they weren't getting enough donations for the projection. So I just was like, that's why we urged them to increase the marketing and then maybe find other ways to fund it. Does that answer the question? If it doesn't, you can ask and clarify, and someone else can maybe provide more.
Yeah, that does answer my question. I guess I was looking to see, if the current marketing was effective, cost effective, and if that wasn't the case, if that was maybe the problem, why they didn't get enough funds, then maybe it wouldn't be better to allocate funds to marketing and maybe allocate funds directly to the program, was the thought.
Oh, that's an interesting thought, actually. But yeah, increasing marketing is definitely something they need to do because I think it's all priority based, right? Like if they do market more, they will get more money. So just prioritizing that. So
Thank you for the dialogue there between those questions and answers. Are there any further questions on this legislation? Are there any points on this legislation? All right, Fabio, I see your hand first.
Hi guys, and everyone, I should say hi everyone. So I think this is a great piece of legislation. Thank you for writing this. Really important. I just wanted to pitch out maybe a crazy idea. It seems like Mackenzie Bezos nowadays is donating to like everywhere and everything and everyone. Would it be so crazy of us to write a letter on behalf of the student government to Mackenzie Bezos asking her to fund or donate something to the Connecticut commitment? Because like you said, it's all based off of donations. And I really think it's a neat program. I mean, when they passed it, I was like even more proud to go to UConn to know that such a program existed for students in need. And I really think it just makes Connecticut proud, us Huskies proud to have this, and to not have it anymore is really disheartening and sad, and all the above. So just wanted to pitch that out there because I feel like she's really donating to a lot of places. And who knows if anyone has asked for a donation before, but I think we have every right and every good intention to ask for donations for a program as good as this. So thanks.
Oh, I think that's so cute, Fabio. Darren, let us know what you think. But I mean, I love Candid You, by the way, Fabio. I wish this was birthed 2 years ago. Like these questions and just hearing you speak makes my heart so happy. This was definitely disheartening to see this go, and I was so proud to be a Husky when this came out too. We could totally write up something. Like I would love to be a part of that. It could be a little far-fetched, but like if she responds, then it could come back. I mean, they got money, you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm definitely not opposed to that. So maybe that's something we can work on in caucus. We can bring it up too. I'll write it down. Irene, if you want to say the next speaker, because Luis seems like he's having technical issues.
Yeah, Luis asked if I could take over. I think he just has to go, so I'm gonna be right back. So we'll just move on to Lakita.
I just want to say I am super happy to see this come through, but also more than that, that last therefore is it the last one or second to last one where it says funding like by any means necessary? I feel like the biggest pushback is that it's all funded by donations and we just don't have the money. But like, and it's so easy to say no. It's harder to find out, well, if not this, what else can we do? And there really is more that they can do. And honestly, we as a committee can do, the community can do. And so like I'm really happy to see those words.
Thank you so much, Lakita. That means a lot.
All right. I see Luis back, but I guess we'll just continue. We'll go with Mitch. Go ahead.
Hey everybody. Yeah, I just want to voice my support with this piece of legislation. I think it's almost a no-brainer. It's a statement of support and further inquiry in how UConn can fund this excellent program. This was part of for anyone that doesn't know, something that helped enable myself come to UConn, and something that I think is really going to limit my sister, who's a senior in high school now, who was considering going to UConn, from also attending alongside me, which she was thinking about. And so it's unfortunate to see that. And in a private conversation I had with Tomcat, I mean, he was also very disheartened that this, and I believe there's like 290 of us because this program only existed this past fall semester with UConn students. So I was lucky, and myself and Darren and other folks were lucky to come to the university in which this program existed for one semester, and that they are going to be able to or guarantee that funding for myself and anyone else who did make it in the nick of time. But for anyone that is no longer going to become a Husky or had dreams of being a Husky, I think this really damages it. It's unfortunate to see that, and I just want to voice my support for all the authors involved and everything. And also, I think it's a no-brainer. It's not super specific if anyone is worried about budgeting and stuff. I think it's just calling for action to be done on this issue, and I think that's something we can all rally behind. Thank you.
Hi all.
Thanks,
So I'm back
Mitch.
now. Thank you, Mitch. I missed all the discussion. I hope it was productive. I'm sure Irene did a wonderful job while my internet wasn't cooperating. So
Can I
a
say
big
one
hand to
thing
her
to
for
Mitch?
stepping up. Go right ahead, Neha.
You said in your speech that you and Darren are lucky to be here and the rest of the 290 people, but I think UConn is lucky to have you guys. And that's why we need this program.
You are of course the sweetest. Yeah.
We'll now go to Fabio. All right, Fabio.
That was out by accident. Yeah, I'm good.
No worries, no worries. Irene, feel free to speak on this.
Thank you, Louise. I just want to reaffirm everything that's been said. This piece of legislation is so great. And I remember when it first came to student development a while back, and it was somewhat different. And I think that one thing I really wanted to comment on right now was how happy I am about how collaborative this piece of legislation was. I mean, a huge applause to the authors and to everyone who worked on this, because I think lately we've been having some difficulties with collaboration and with bridging those divides, and we did a really good job with this piece of legislation in doing that. So thank you everyone for collaborating and for being very united, and I will yield my time.
Thank you, Irene. We'll go to Lakita and then Damani.
Sorry, just a quick question actually. I was kind of curious, do we happen to know how many people were supported by like the program the first year? Like did they ever like give numbers or release numbers on that or not really?
Yeah, so 290 people. I think it was about $6,000 at like average per person. It's either 6 or 2,000. It's in the where yeah, there it is. 2,600 per person to bridge the difference. And so 290 people.
Oh, cool.
So I put that in there just kind of to stress, like, you're not covering $10,000, right? You're covering the bridge and the tuition cost. So thank you for asking.
Mitch, is this related to the question? I saw your hand go up right afterwards.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the number that I was referring to, 290, it was something along those lines. It was what Tomcat personally said to me, but I haven't seen that number like written down anywhere, so I could be incorrect. He said something along those lines, but yeah.
Okay, thank you for the clarification there. Damani, feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, but someone else already covered what I was going to say.
Okay, there we are. Are there any further points of discussion or perhaps motions before we move into a vote? Seeing none, I'm going to move to forward this by unanimous consent. Are there any objections to this? With no objections, it is so moved by unanimous consent. Congratulations to the authors. We will now, that concludes our voting items for today, and we will now move into discussion. So the only point of discussion that I had requested for this week was the pass-fail question. And this comes from Lakita, so if you'd like to introduce it, feel free to go ahead now.
Yeah, sure. So, hi guys. I just wanted to like pose the question to Senate. I was looking to like I've had requests about pursuing like whether USG is going to be pursuing pass fail again with University Senate and other things. I kind of wanted to get everyone's opinions. I did want to see like, is that something the body is still like in support of, or like does anyone have any objections and whatnot?
Yeah,
So we'll
Are
go
we
to
just-
Ben and then Mitch, and then I'll open a poll if I'm told exactly what the options are. So Ben, Mitch, then Paul.
Honestly, I don't think that we should. And I'm strongly in support of pass fail, but it didn't pass in the fall. And it should have passed in the fall. It didn't pass in the fall, and I think given that, you're not going to see. I think it would be extremely difficult to get something similar to pass in the spring. I think that a smaller, um, more targeted pass fail, I think is definitely something that we should keep considering. But something on the scale of what we had in spring 2020, I don't see frankly, I don't see as happening. And I think that we as senators and specifically as the University Senate reps should be focusing on what we reasonably can get done for students.
I'm so sorry to cut you off. Let me just clarify. Actually, I realized like it might have been confusing when I said that. So what we would essentially be pursuing is not what happened in spring 2020. It would be that we would ask that it be opened up for content areas, and then it'd be left to the discretion of individual schools and colleges to make the decision. So it would essentially be left to the deans of
and
said
that
schools and
yes,
colleges.
yes, absolutely.
Sorry,
I think that we
that's what
should
it
be-
is. I
think
realized
that we
there
should be
was some
pursuing that.
confusion.
All right. Thank you for that little bit of back and forth. We'll go to Mitch. We'll basically cap the speaking on this here, and then we'll do a quick poll. What I have so far is USG should advocate for pass fail. USG should not advocate for pass fail, and make a little note in the top that this is not a binding vote. This is just kind of a poll of what the students in the room feel. Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I was gonna say that I think pass fail in whatever capacity we may be able to achieve. I mean, I the way I think about this, and I'm always going to think about this, is we're in the middle of a global pandemic. I think students should be cut as much slack as they possibly can. We don't know about individuals' situations, and I mean, if I thought it was possible, I would say, I mean, I think the spring 2019 conditions should last throughout the entirety of said pandemic, but. So I think absolutely, as the undergraduate student government, we should support whatever efforts we can in regards to pass fail and being able to provide some accommodation to students and whatever may be happening with their families. I mean, the pandemic is still raging. We have, unfortunately, a lot of Americans dying every day, and that's not exactly going down anytime soon. And so I think this university, and as with any university, should be taking that into account. As I just think that's a no-brainer. So, and I think most of you agree.
Thank you, Mitch. We'll now go to Janetta.
Yeah, I genuinely think that pass fail, like even in University Senate when it was voted upon, it was still very close given that half of the floor wanted pass fail. It was in the 50s. And if we had pursued an avenue where we presented it one meeting and voted on it the next, it probably would have passed. But I think some of us were unaware of this rule given that we weren't oriented properly. But I think students deserve this option, and if we have any capability of pursuing it, even without all like laxation of rules, we should do so. As a student representative for Scholastic Standards, I don't see it passing in my committee, but overall, I do see discussion happening and hopefully passing.
Thank you, Janetta. We'll go to Katie, Lakita, then Fabio.
Yeah, so I basically just wanted to say that, when Lakita, talked to me about like what are we doing, I want to make it clear that we will be using this like quick poll or whatever we do to attach our name to pass fail. So whatever we decide right now, like that's determining whether or not academic affairs puts our name on whatever Lakita does. I want to echo like entirely what Mitch said. I think that if anything, the student survey that we did that got 1,000 responses showed that a lot of students are struggling. They're still struggling, and essentially the university's in denial. I also agree with Ben in that we probably won't be able to get what we had in spring 2020. So we are keeping all of those factors in mind, and we are obviously for whatever path will help students. And I also just wanted to quickly mention, I don't know if you all saw it, but the extension of the withdrawal is offered this semester too. So if that's like any like question, that's, you know, that's happening. So
Thank you, Katie. We'll go to Lakita, then Fabio.
Oh, could you go to me last?
Sure. We'll go Fabio, then Damani, then.
Thanks, Luis. So I just wanted to hop on here and say, so I wasn't at Senate the last two Senates. I don't know if anyone noticed. I've recently suffered death in my family related to COVID. And, you know, it's been hard. And I guess my point with bringing that up is, you know, with all this talk of the vaccines and Joe Biden's administration and all the stuff we see on the news, you know, it's easy to forget that this pandemic is still raging viciously. Okay. And, you know, we may have some in-person classes now. And after a year, we've kind of become accustomed to this weird world that we're living in. But the pandemic is no less like influential in our lives. And for some of us, you know, I'm sure some of us here have suffered deaths and severe sicknesses in our families, and some of us continue to experience that. You know, I'm more behind in my classes now than I've ever been, just because of everything going on. You know, and I feel like I know I'm going to get through it, but not everybody has that outlook. And you know, I think the university perhaps needs to be reminded. You know, people on University Senate need to be reminded that this is still a problem. And I know pass fail would benefit students, and they should have passed it last semester. But because the pandemic is still raging, I don't think because they didn't pass it last semester that we should not push for it this semester. Quite frankly, it should have been passed last semester, and I think we should still do our best to advocate for what we believe is right. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Fabio. We'll go. I'm going to cap the speakers list for this discussion after Mitch, and then we can move into just general discussion. So we'll go Damani, Mitch, and then Lakita, and then it'll be concluded. So go ahead, Damani.
So I want to open this by saying that I am a university senator, and I take that obligation very seriously. And I'm about to discuss how I feel on this issue, but the way that I will carry myself as a university senator in the University Senate will be dictated by whatever stance AC Affairs decides to take. So with that said, I do not think that we have a strong chance of getting pass-fail through the Senate. I do understand the procedural changes that we could use to approach it differently that would require only a simple majority and not a super majority. But I'm thinking about some of our other University Senate priorities, like we are seeking to double our representation in the Senate. And we will be seeking two separate votes to double our University Senate representation, one to double the number of university senators themselves from 5 to 10, and in a separate vote seeking to increase the number of undergraduates on each committee from 2 to 4. I think if we ask at that same meeting to revisit pass-fail, which failed 3 times, which failed in two different votes this year, and we got some limited success on it 1 year ago. I think that what that is going to look like is it's going to look like the undergrads got a result they didn't like, and now they're trying to change the rules. And I think it will harm our ability to achieve some of our other priorities like representation, which will then make it easier to fight battles like this in the future. I don't want to discount the importance or the academic benefit or the academic and non-academic benefits that a friendlier pass-fail policy can bring. I just don't think it's super likely that we're going to get, well, let me phrase it this way. I think it's unlikely that we would be able to achieve a victory on that in the Senate. And given that, I think that it would also, bringing the question back up may harm our ability to achieve some of our other priorities. So that's my thoughts on that. Again, as a university senator, whatever AC Affairs goes, I'm going to get up and give my full-throated support as we did, as all of the university senators did on the other pass-fail debates and votes.
We'll go to Mitch.
Hey guys, two things. One thing I was gonna just comment on, I think it's a huge, I mean, we're obviously talking about, I mean, one major thing that I think we've been pushing as an undergraduate student body is mental health. And I think even if your family is not losing a family member or whatnot, I mean, simply due to the conditions that we're living in with the pandemic, doing mainly all online classes, not seeing friends and everything, I think there's a huge lens of simple mental health. And obviously that ties into anything that may be happening with your family, yourself, or anyone getting sick. So I think that's one point that I think I don't need to belabor more on. I think we all kind of understand that point. And then I think I personally, and it might not be the most tactile or logistical approach, but I kind of disagree with Damani. And I think that something like this, if I speak more frankly, I think what the university and other universities are doing are really discounting how students are being affected by this pandemic and not looking at it from a community approach. And I think that's our job as senators here is to take this and say, how's our community doing? How's our community feeling? And how can we make it easier on all of us? And I think that, I don't know, I understand that its likelihood may not be high, but I don't think it's our time to back down. I think if we say, okay, we're coming at this a fourth time, I mean, they got to at least look at that and say, well, damn, I mean, this is more than students just wanting to get away with being able to not do well in a class because they're slacking. It's more than that. And I think that's just my personal opinion. And I think almost based on principle, it's something that we should continue pursuing as long as this pandemic exists. But
Thank you, Mitch. We'll now end this discussion with Lakita and then move to this unofficial poll.
I'll yield my time, actually. I think some of my points have been said, and I don't want to waste any more time.
Thank you for that yield. We're going to open the poll at this time. As I said, this would be the end of the discussion. I'm sorry, Katie.
Wait, I just have to point of clarification that like whatever decision happens here is what Academic Affairs is doing. So I don't know if like naming it unofficially like is the right way to go because we will be basing our decision off this.
Okay. Well, I only agreed to put a poll here that wasn't binding. So
Okay.
you can do what you want based off of my non-binding poll, but I know that I in no way intend for this to be binding.
Luis, can people like me vote for this? It doesn't say there's not
Yes.
a number. Yes.
Yes.
Love to vote when I can.
I just wanted like a general like of what the room is thinking. I'm also, oh yeah, full disclosure, I was planning on releasing a Reddit post, not Reddit post. UConn Memory has agreed to do a poll on the like just to see what all students think about pass fail this semester and what they want to see in terms of academic relief. So that was going out regardless. And so I just wanted to get a sense of this room on top of that.
So the results of this poll are 14 in favor of advocating, 4 against, and then 9 who didn't vote. Yeah, that's the results of this poll. So do with that what you will. Are there any further points of discussion? Lakita, is this from the previous discussion or a new one?
Oh, sorry, I didn't even notice that like the hand was still up. It's from the previous.
No worries. Just wanted to be sure. Seeing no further points of discussion, we'll move into announcements. The first and only announcement that I was informed of in advance is from our parliamentarian, with a program that I think that she's going to be rolling out at the beginning of our next caucus. So feel free to talk about that, Neha.
All right, I actually have 3 things, so bear with me to the 28 people left. One thing, can I share my screen to show the 2 things that I have? The timeline
sure.
and the... Awesome. So I'm just gonna say before I share my screen is that if you guys are old senators or old members, you guys remember snaps and claps. I recently was reminded of this. I forget who did it, but if you did, claps to you, snaps and claps to you. Thank you. Anyways, snaps and claps is basically just a way to show thanks and appreciate someone and send it. So it's going to be a little Google form. I'm emailing out everything I'm showing right now after Senate. So it's a little form where you say, you know, your thanks to someone. It could be anonymous. It doesn't have to be. And at the end of every caucus, I'm just going to be reading them aloud, whether I get 4, 5, 1 response. So just to show appreciation to people in this organization, because I want this to feel like a family. I want to uplift everyone. Everyone in here is doing awesome work. So this is just a way to show that. So that's one. And now, can I share my screen?
Go for it. I think you should have that authority. If not, I will figure it out.
Okay, so first is going to be a legislation timeline. I am not sure how I can share this with the whole listserv, so I think I'm just going to share this with every individual email. But this is something that I'm going to be working on, and in the future, if we have a legislative coordinator, this will be their job. But right now, this is what I'm working on. So this is just to keep track of all the legislation we've seen, who writes it, how long it takes to pass, all the ones that have passed today. I'm going to update this. And then also future legislation. So every Friday, the directors meet. And then in caucus, I'll just be hearing what everyone wants to do. So this is where I'm going to keep track of everything. So right now we have some things in the works. I'm going to be updating this. So I'm going to share with you guys just so we can keep track of old legislation, new legislation, future everything. So we'll have it organized for you guys and shared with you guys, and this will be shared with leadership for full transparency with everyone in this organization. So that's one. Any questions before I go on? This is pretty straightforward, so you don't have to say any questions. Oh my God, look at my little, okay, you guys are seeing my my home screen. It's cute. Can you guys see the form now?
Yes.
Okay. So this is something we came up with because we don't want workshops to be taking up this entire caucus. We want to use caucus for community building, but we still want you guys to be involved in some of the like events at UConn, and then some of like the diversity inclusion events, some workshops. Not all are about diversity inclusion. There is mental health. There is like yoga, just anything that's like I said, that's going to help you intrapersonally and interpersonally. That's kind of what we're going for. So this is kind of hard to explain, but I separate into 2 things. One's like an event and panel, and I tried my best to find everything. If I'm missing something and you're going to it, please just put it in the other category. I went through all the cultural centers in the big event calendar, and I also linked the big event calendar in the bio or summary. And so these are all the events. I did put ones that have passed. So if you've gone to one already, you can check it off, let us know. And then here are some workshops and activities. These are more of the fun and easygoing ones. Like I said, recovery yoga, watching Heal, the documentary at a watch party, intro to mindfulness. So I want you guys to attend one of these and one of the above ones. I think that will work best. Let me know what you think. If you do 2 of the above ones, that's fine. But I'm not recommending doing 2 of these because like I said, this is more mindful and more intrapersonal work, and then this is more of the interpersonal section, which I think all senators need to talk to their constituents, other senators, and leadership. So, and then after that, this is just asking who organized it. Trying to get you guys more involved in the cultural centers and events that USG runs, the Justice Now initiative, all that. Shout out to Christine and all the amazing work she does. And then some insights you gain from it, whether it be about yourself or what you learned about the community or anything.
And so I'll be sharing the timeline, the form, and let me know if you guys want to see the snaps and claps form, but it's basically like, who are you trying to appreciate? Like name of the person, sentence about them, and whether you want to be anonymous or not. So that's all. I talk really fast. I'm sorry. It's a habit. So let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you to Neha for all those great things. I'm going to make a brief announcement about next caucus. And then, wait, I think that I saw Josh had his hand up to make an announcement before I called on Neha. So Josh, feel free to make your announcement first.
Thank you, Luis. I'll make it pretty brief. Intent to run forms, there's been some confusion on this. Intent to run forms are due at midnight tonight. So it's midnight on Thursday, February 11th, but that's like tonight. So get your intent to run forms done if you have interest in running for any elected positions again. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. Yeah.
We'll go to Donnie for an announcement next.
Yeah, this is something that the elections brought into my mind. As part of our process for amending our Constitution, should we ever be doing that, we have to approve it at the Senate and then have it a referendum by the full student body, which means by sake of timeline, if you are someone who's interested in doing that, it needs to come to the next Senate. I wanted to let the Senate know that the Diversity and Outreach Commission will be evaluating the Senate for matters of equity as not, will not be evaluating the Senate, we'll be evaluating the Constitution for matters of equity. So if you have anything that you know has been striking you in the Constitution is like, that seems wrong, please send me an email. We can discuss it next week, and we'll send something over to internal when we're done to be considered by the Senate after that. So thank you.
Thank you for that point, Damani. It's an important one to make. Oh, sorry, I have an alarm for 9 o'clock. One more announcement before we conclude here. Next week we will have a shortened caucus. It will run from 6:30 to 7, and then at 7 I have agreed, as a result of communications with the president and new event open to senators to go immediately after the end of caucus. So I encourage you all to come to caucus, and then I believe it'll bleed right into the event if I understand correctly. But it'll be with the speaker who we had come to governing board, and then we had an event open to the student body. So I encourage you all to bring ideas for next Senate. We'll discuss them briefly for about a half hour ahead of time, kind of get some ideas out there, and then head right into this other event. And I think that Mike wants to say a little bit more about this, so I'll let him talk about it.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it also appropriate if I make an additional announcement as well?
Go for it. You have my complete permission.
Great, thank you. This was an opportunity that we provided for leadership, and they seem to really enjoy it. It's part of our effort to bring restorative models and practices to the organization because we had such a big disruption due to COVID. So this is a great opportunity to learn about civil discourse. And it's really awesome for us developing as citizens and as students and as leaders because our country is not providing a good example for us right now. So we kind of have to build this stuff and these mechanisms for ourselves. I really think it's going to be a great event. So I hope you can make it. I also want to announce that we have a few vacancies in our university Senate committees. These are great opportunities to form relationships with faculty members and to push for policy goals, and I think it's a really great opportunity that more people should take advantage of. I will be sending an email out later today that outlines which committees are open and how you can apply for them, but I do encourage all senators and your friends or anybody in the university to step up and take on this new challenge. Please contact me if you have any questions. I yield back to the speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. With that, one more announcement before we come to a close. I did truly appreciate the discourse we had today. I know that one of the more contentious votes was on my piece of legislation, and I welcome it. I thought that this meeting of the Senate was a great example of the way that we can all work together collaboratively to a productive end goal. And I hope that all future sessions of the Senate engage in similar levels of discourse. So with that, I'm going to call the meeting to a close at 9:02 p.m. I'm very thrilled that we didn't pass the 3-hour mark. And I thank you all for coming. I'll stay in the room for a moment to chat and discuss the Senate or frankly anything. So if you would like to say something, I'll be here for a little bit. Thank you all.
Yeah, so this is I have a little mini announcement, I guess. Damani just talked about how he wants to bring stuff up to increase student representation in the Senate. I actually wrote a piece of legislation on that. It'll be going to committees shortly, but if anyone wants to help out on it, because it's still very much in the early stages, shoot me an email or a text or just say something and I'll add you.
Which Senate?
University Senate.
Okay. I missed.
I think student representation in the student senate is adequate. Where it is at 100%.
Is this the legislation that we are meeting to discuss at 4 on Friday?
Yes and no. I hadn't written it when I kind of wrote it a couple hours ago.
Okay.
So that is it's gonna be a part of the conversation.
Okay.
I believe Lakita also had things to talk about in that conversation.
Yes, that's why